Welcome the Lord's chosen. Those who dig graves for others often forget to measure their own. That's not just an old saying. It's a fact history never stops proving. From ancient empires that collapsed under their own schemes, to modern groups that thought manipulation was a lifetime insurance policy, one pattern repeats itself. Traps have a cruel way of snapping back on the architects, and when they do, the sound isn't just painful, it's catastrophic. Now imagine this, a group so sure of themselves, so drunk on their own cleverness that they designed the perfect snare for the chosen ones. They plotted, they whispered, they celebrated too early, and in that exact celebration, the floor beneath them gave way. One by one, they're not just losing power, they're losing face, allies, and the false safety net they believed would hold forever. That's not karma playing nice, that's karma with a sense of humor, kicking back in the front row with popcorn, enjoying the chaos they scripted for someone else. And here's the twist that keeps people watching. The chosen ones didn't even have to retaliate. The group's own arrogance became the demolition crew, their lies tangled into ropes, their gossip turned into fire, and their all-for-one pact. It dissolved faster than sugar in hot water. What was supposed to be a victorious ambush has become a slow-motion implosion, playing out in full view. So buckle up, because this isn't just about downfall, it's about poetic irony at its sharpest. The hunters set the stage, but the chosen ones didn't step into the trap. The hunters did. And now, the destruction is rolling out like dominoes, precise, brutal, and completely unstoppable. Number one, the trap revealed their map, not yours. That's the irony most people miss. When people set a trap, they think they're being clever. They believe they're hidden, operating from the shadows, untouchable. But in truth, a trap is nothing more than a confession written in action. It tells you exactly what they fear, what they value, and how they think you will respond. Every detail of their setup is a roadmap to their own insecurities. Think about it. A person who tries to corner you is already telling you where their blind spots are. If they use gossip, it means they're terrified of silence. If they bait you with lies, it means truth is their weakest point. If they attack your name, it means your presence carries weight they can't bear. They don't realize that in trying to control the story, they end up handing you the script. They believe they're building a cage for you, but really they're sketching out the blueprint of their own collapse. This is why chosen ones never need to overreact. The very act of someone plotting against you is proof they've exposed themselves. Their energy, their strategy, their alliances, even their timing, it's all on display. They think they've outsmarted you, but in reality, they've just traced the outline of their own downfall with a marker so thick it's impossible to miss. What was meant to be your end becomes their open diary. And here's the kicker. Once you know their map, you don't even have to fight them directly. You just stop walking into the directions they laid out. You refuse to show up where they expect you. You decline the bait they thought you couldn't resist. Suddenly their whole plan collapses without you lifting a finger. It's like pulling the plug from their stage lights. The show ends, and they're left stumbling in the dark. That's why the chosen never panic when traps are laid. The trap itself is the proof that the enemy has already burned their resources, exposed their intent, and shown their hand. What was meant to cage you becomes a mirror that exposes them. And once it's revealed, their downfall is no longer a matter of if, but when. Number two, their unity was a costume. Your patience burned the glue. On the surface, they looked unbreakable. A group moving together, laughing together, plotting together, almost convincing themselves that their bond was stronger than any truth. But the thing about costumes is that they only work under bright lights and short performances. Behind the curtain, the threads start to unravel. Their unity was never built on loyalty or genuine care. It was stitched together with convenience, common envy, and a shared target. You. That kind of bond has an expiration date, and patience is the one force that accelerates the unraveling. Patience doesn't look powerful, but it is. While they rushed to maintain their performance, you stayed still. You didn't force the mask off them, you simply waited long enough for it to slip. Their alliance was glued together by excitement and gossip, but glue weakens under time. When you didn't react to their traps the way they hoped, when you didn't fall apart under their schemes, the glue began to dry out and crack. And once it started cracking, every hidden rivalry, every quiet jealousy, every suppressed insecurity started crawling out of the shadows. Groups like that don't truly share victories, they share targets. As long as they were united in plotting against you, they felt strong. But once their plans backfired, once nothing worked the way they imagined, that false unity couldn't survive the pressure. Blame started bouncing around like a loose bullet. Fingers were pointed, suspicions grew, and private conversations became little betrayals. What looked like harmony was only synchronized hatred, and when that hatred lost its power, they turned it on each other. Patience is underestimated because it looks like doing nothing, but it's the kind of doing nothing that reveals everything. By not reacting, you gave them the stage to expose themselves. Their gossip became louder, their insecurities became visible, and their unity collapsed in plain view. They thought they had a fortress. What they really had was a costume party. And when the masks fell off, not only did the world see who they truly were, they saw it too. And that was the beginning of their end. The glue that held them together wasn't loyalty, it was desperation. And desperation can't survive patience. Number 3, they weaponized gossip. Karma weaponized context. Gossip always feels powerful in the moment. It spreads fast, it gathers listeners, and it can sting deeply when aimed at the right spot. That's why people addicted to control lean on it. It gives them a quick and dirty way to make someone look small. But gossip is a weapon with no precision. It slices wildly, and while it might land a blow at first, it never lasts, because gossip is fragile without context. Once the truth, the facts, or even time itself walks into the room, the gossip starts to look flimsy. It flips from sounding like a revelation to sounding like desperation. That's what makes gossip so dangerous to the one who uses it. The moment someone spreads it, they're already gambling with their credibility. If the gossip doesn't hold up, they're the ones who look foolish. They thought they were drawing blood from you, but all they did was cut their own reputation open. And once people realize someone thrives on gossip, they start questioning everything that comes out of their mouth. The weapon dulls fast, and worse, it backfires. Suddenly, the gossiper is no longer trusted. They're tolerated, laughed at, or quietly avoided. Karma works through context. The same words that once stirred an audience turn into evidence against the speaker. Their exaggerations start to sound like lies, their stories start to clash, and their bitterness becomes obvious. What once looked like confidence now looks like insecurity dressed up as talk. And when truth finally arrives, even silently, it doesn't just clear your name, it stains theirs permanently. People remember who tried to bury you with whispers, and they remember who turned those whispers into noise. The chosen ones don't need to defend themselves against gossip, because context is undefeated. Reality doesn't need a stage or an audience, it simply arrives. And when it does, it flips the whole story. The gossipers who thought they were clever find themselves exposed as petty, jealous, and unreliable. They wanted to be the narrators, but karma handed them the role of clowns in their own play. What they tried to use as a weapon became their downfall, because context is the one thing gossip can't survive. It never has, and it never will. Number 4, you turned scarcity into their panic. They built influence by engineering urgency, limited time drama, manufactured crises, and the constant demand for attention like a scarcity store with one last ticket. That strategy works when people buy the scarcity narrative. When attention is the product and the crowd keeps showing up, their power looks endless. But influence that lives off artificial shortage is fragile. Once you change the currency from noise to something deeper, patience, silence, results, scarcity stops being a lever and becomes a trap. Patience is the slow tax they never budgeted for. While they pumped adrenaline into the room, you let time do the accounting. Every forced deadline, every staged meltdown, every act now or lose out moment lost value when met with a refusal to rush. Silence is a different kind of pressure. Where they expected panic to spread and multiply, quiet made people think instead of flee. Silence pulls oxygen from their theatrics. Their urgent calls start to echo back as hollow echoes because the audience isn't rushing to refill the room. Results are the final currency that strips theatrics of power. Their whole model depended on attention being mistaken for achievement. When you deliver steady outcomes rather than emotional responses, attention loses its premium. People begin to compare substance to spectacle and prefer the former. That shift is brutal for those who sell urgency. They were counting on people acting before facts could arrive. Once facts and results become the norm, the rush buyers vanish and the scarcity script collapses. When scarcity becomes panic, the group shows its true weakness. Desperation replaces confidence. They start accelerating lies, recycling scandals, and offering louder promises because their ordinary methods no longer produce the crowded attention they need. Panic drives mistakes. Allies second-guess, insiders leak, and the careful choreography that kept the act convincing falls apart. The more they scream for attention, the more the world notices the emptiness behind the scream. Turning scarcity into panic doesn't require theatrics of your own. It requires strategic steadiness. Refuse the bait of urgency, answer with calm, and produce outcomes that don't need spectacle. That quiet consistency makes their scarcity tactics look ridiculous instead of powerful. In the end, they're left waving fake tickets to a show nobody wants to attend anymore. Their panic is self-inflicted, and it's the clearest sign that their influence was rented, not earned. Number 5. Their moral shortcuts became their fingerprints. Small betrayals are rarely random. Their habits disguised as solutions. When someone chooses the easy wrong over the hard right, they leave a mark, a pattern that repeats because shortcuts are addictive. At first, it's a tiny convenience, bending a rule, omitting a truth, prioritizing outcome over method. Then it becomes the reflex. Those tiny ethics-free choices build on each other until the person's behavior reads like a ledger of compromise. Follow the ledger and you trace the hand that wrote it. You can hide a lie for a night, but patterns don't sleep. Every time they chose expediency, they revealed what they prize more than integrity: speed, advantage, or saving face. People who take these paths learn how to justify themselves, and the justifications become as familiar as their signatures. That's why a moral audit always points back to the same weak character. The same short-term decisions made in different contexts map to the same underlying cheapness of spirit. It's the invisible trail no amount of public performance can cover. Those fingerprints aren't only moral, they show up in who they protect and who they betray, in which rules apply to them and which rules apply to others. They explain sudden alliances and sudden silences. They predict the small betrayals that later become headline scandals. When you look for motives, the pattern tells the story: decisions made to avoid consequence, to grab reward, to dodge accountability. Motive is a map. Follow it and you find the weak links that held the whole scheme together. This is what makes moral shortcuts so dangerous for those who take them. Each shortcut is an investment in future exposure. The same tactic that saves them now becomes the evidence later. People remember repeated behavior, not one-off explanations. And when those repeated behaviors line up, witnesses start to see consistency where there was supposed to be innocence. What was framed as clever becomes recognizable as contempt for principle. For the chosen ones watching, this is powerful. You don't need to outshout or out-scheme someone who has already signed their own confession. Keep records of patterns, not just incidents. Let time collect their small betrayals into a clear narrative. When those fingerprints are laid out, they don't look like strategy anymore. They look like character. That understanding doesn't just expose them, it makes their defense impossible. Integrity may be slow and boring, but in a world of shortcuts, it's the flashlight that finds the prints. Number 6. They bet on humiliation, you bet on consequences. Public shame is loud and fast. It sparks headlines, viral clips, and the immediate rush of social judgment. That noise can look like victory because it pressures people to apologize, flee, or hide, but humiliation is a surface wound, messy, performative, and built on the temporary economy of outrage. Consequences, on the other hand, are slow work. They don't need trending tags or dramatic footage. Consequences are structural, policies adjusted, contracts reviewed, responsibilities reassigned, legal scrutiny initiated, and relationships restructured. Where humiliation seeks quick spectacle, consequences seal the cracks in the foundation so the same abuse can't happen again. When someone weaponizes humiliation, they're counting on short-term theater. They want a spectacle that makes them look powerful and forces the target into a sharp, visible reaction. It's emotional accounting. Score a public fall and the scoreboard looks good. But applause fades. People who surf public shame depend on attention staying with the story long enough to bury the target. They don't invest in changing systems or building airtight cases. They prefer the glow of instant social triumph to the sweat of methodical dismantling. That's where they're vulnerable. Betting on consequences means shifting the battlefield from feeds and comment threads to structures that outlast headlines. It means documenting behavior, preserving records, building airtight narratives, and engaging institutions that enforce long-term change. It means converting a scandal into statutory review, a personnel decision, a contractual termination, or a governance reform. Consequences don't humiliate. They remove the tools and platforms that made the humiliation possible in the first place. That turns spectacle into accountability and panic into prevention. The difference shows up in outcomes. Humiliation can make someone feel small for a day. Consequences remove their ability to cause harm again. Humiliation creates theater and then leaves the stage. Consequences change the stage itself. People who rely on public shaming find their tactics exhausted when there's no repeat audience or when institutions refuse to act on the chaos. Those who focus on consequences build cases that survive cuteness and viral cycles. When institutions and contracts begin to react, allies who once cheered the spectacle start recalculating their exposure. The loudest voice in the room becomes the one with the cleanest paperwork. Choosing consequences over humiliation is not sentimental, it's strategic. It's trading the temporary thrill of seeing someone embarrassed for the durable satisfaction of watching their power erode for real. It's less flashy, slower, and often unseen, but it is the difference between momentary revenge and permanent protection. In the end, structure outlives spectacle, and consequences are the architecture that turns humiliation into history. Number 7. Every bold lie compounded into a scandal ledger. One lie can slide through the cracks. People excuse it, rationalize it, or even forget it, especially if the lie is dressed well enough. But lies don't like being alone. They call for backup. Each new fabrication demands another one to protect the first, and suddenly the liar is not just holding a story, but running an entire economy of falsehoods. The problem with economies is that debts pile up, and in this case, every lie becomes an entry in a ledger, each one accruing interest. What started as a little narrative control ends up as a scandal account waiting for collection. The chosen ones didn't have to push back with noise. Time did the heavy lifting. Because lies don't exist in stillness. They depend on motion. They have to keep being repeated, refreshed, and reinforced to stay alive. That constant motion is where cracks appear. Small inconsistencies show up. Stories contradict each other. Details that seemed irrelevant at the time grow into glaring discrepancies. What was once a clever performance slowly mutates into an archive of contradictions, each page in the ledger making the next harder to explain away. The more brazen the lies, the faster the account grows. Bold lies aren't just risky, they're memorable. People remember the big dramatic claims, the impossible promises, the exaggerated accusations, and because they remember, they compare. When reality fails to match, the memory of the lie becomes evidence against the speaker. Repeated often enough, those bold lies stop looking like mistakes and start looking like strategy. A strategy that exposes motive, not just error. Debt always comes due. When the ledger grows too large, the liar no longer controls the narrative. The evidence begins controlling them. They have to spend more energy maintaining old fabrications than building new influence. Their credibility drains. Allies stop defending them, not because they've suddenly grown moral, but because association costs too much. The very network that once cheered the lies starts distancing itself to avoid being dragged into repayment. This is how bold lies destroy a group from the inside out. Each one feels like a win in the moment, a clever trick, a shield against accountability. But each entry is a receipt, time-stamped and filed. By the time the ledger is full, no amount of spin can erase it. Repayment is not optional, and when the debt collector arrives, it doesn't come quietly. It comes with collapse. Number 8. Their allies were transactional. Your exposure made them accounting conscious. Alliances built on convenience are never solid. They're rental agreements, not ownership. These so-called allies were not bound by loyalty, conviction, or principle. They were bound by benefit. As long as proximity to the group brought influence, money, or status, they stayed. But the moment the balance sheet flipped, when the association started costing more than it gave, the calculations changed. That's the weakness of transactional loyalty. It doesn't survive risk. Exposure is what tilts the scale. Once the lies, schemes, or scandals become visible, allies no longer see partnership. They see liability. Reputation is a kind of currency, and nobody wants to trade with someone whose account is sinking. Your steady exposure turned their dirty secrets into public liabilities. Suddenly, those who once laughed along or nodded in agreement began revising their math. How much does this relationship cost me? What do I stand to lose if I'm still seen standing beside them? The ledger that once justified loyalty now screams, cut your losses. Fair weather friends always fold under heat. They don't leave with a speech, they leave with excuses. They start slow, showing up less, distancing themselves in conversations, shifting alliances in subtle ways. Eventually, they walk away altogether, leaving the same people they once praised to face the fire alone. And it's not because they grew moral, it's because they grew cautious. Self-preservation is the truest motive of transactional allies. They don't want the burn marks, so they abandon the match holders to their own flames. That's why exposure is so devastating to corrupt groups. It doesn't just embarrass them, it dissolves their support system. Their loyal circle was only ever there for the perks, and exposure strips those perks down to nothing. Once the benefits vanish, the group is left bare, with no shield of allies, no protective crowd, and no convenient partners. What looked like strength was really rented scaffolding. And scaffolding always comes down when the project is condemned. Your role wasn't to fight their allies head-on, but to let truth adjust the accounting books. Once the costs outweighed the benefits, the exodus happened naturally. In the end, transactional loyalty is its own curse. It guarantees that the moment things turn sour, abandonment is inevitable. They aren't just being destroyed from the outside, they're being deserted from within. Number 9, they used fear as currency. You became the exchange rate. Fear is one of the oldest tools of control. It doesn't require facts, it doesn't require justice, it doesn't even require skill, just the ability to make people believe they'll lose something if they don't comply. Entire systems of manipulation are built on it. Fear buys silence, it buys obedience, it buys hesitation. For a while, it even buys loyalty, though a loyalty born out of survival is always counterfeit. But fear, like any currency, is only valuable if people agree on its worth. The moment someone changes the exchange rate, the economy collapses. That's exactly what happened when you refused to buy at their price. Fear only works when the cost feels unbearable, when the risk looks larger than the reward. By setting new terms, truth, transparency, accountability, you rewrote the value system. Suddenly their threats weren't expensive, they were inflated. What they tried to sell as terrifying looked cheap, next to the weight of honesty. Their intimidation stopped being convincing once it was measured against the scale of clarity. And once one person demonstrates that fear can be resisted, the whole market shifts. This is why their power began to crumble. They weren't prepared for anyone to question the value of their threats. Fear had always been their quick cash, the currency they could spend without effort. But when you became the exchange rate, their transactions failed. They tried to buy silence, but truth shouted louder. They tried to purchase obedience, but accountability demanded receipts. They tried to cash in intimidation, but transparency exposed them as bankrupt. The entire system they built depended on fear holding its value, and you broke the peg. And here's the beauty of it. Once fear loses credibility, it never regains it at full strength. People who once cowered begin to see the bluff. They start asking questions, comparing stories, noticing patterns. What once froze them now fuels them. Fear is only valuable in the dark. Once the lights come on, it's revealed as counterfeit. Their empire wasn't made of strength, it was made of inflation. They kept printing fear, hoping people would keep spending obedience. But you shifted the economy. You showed that truth is the gold standard, and once that became clear, their entire currency collapsed. Fear stopped buying them anything but their own downfall. Number 10. They created a narrative machine. You fed it facts until it choked. Narratives are powerful because they don't need to be true. They just need to be convincing. A well-crafted story can override memory, cloud judgment, and even rewrite reputations. That's why groups that thrive on manipulation build entire machines to pump out narratives. They recycle gossip, spin half-truths, and lace every sentence with just enough drama to keep people hooked. The machine doesn't rest. It produces noise on demand. But like any machine, it depends on maintenance. Narratives require scaffolding to hold them upright, repetition, emotion, and distraction. Without those supports, the whole thing buckles under its own weight. Facts are that heavy mortar that disrupts the scaffolding. They don't have to arrive fast, they just have to arrive consistently. Every fact you dropped became a weight the narrative couldn't carry. Lies are lightweight, designed for speed and spread, but they can't handle pressure. Stack enough truth on them and the structure starts to creak. What once looked like a flawless story begins showing cracks. Timelines don't add up, motives shift, and contradictions stack so high they can't be ignored. Their machine, built for smooth delivery, begins to stall. The real collapse comes when the audience notices. People will tolerate a lie if it entertains them or confirms their bias. But once the facts pile high enough, even loyal listeners start asking questions. The scaffolding breaks not just because of truth itself, but because of the credibility crisis it triggers. Suddenly, the machine's operators look desperate. They push harder, repeat louder, invent more wild claims, but the harder they work, the more obvious the breakdown becomes. That's the choke point. Lies are oxygen dependent. They need silence, complicity, and constant feeding to survive. Facts are suffocating because they demand accountability, and accountability is the one element the machine was never designed to process. By refusing to be drawn into their spin and instead feeding them pure fact, you didn't just disrupt their story, you dismantled their entire infrastructure. In the end, their narrative machine wasn't destroyed by a counter-story, it was destroyed by weight. Facts were the load-bearing truth that snapped the beams of their scaffolding. And when the scaffolding came down, so did their show. The machine that once hummed with confidence now sputters in full view, exposed as nothing more than noise collapsing under its own fiction. Number 11. Their threats were loud but brittle. Your calm was seismic. Noise has a way of tricking people into thinking it's power. The louder someone shouts, the more it feels like authority, and the more a crowd believes there's force behind the volume. That's why their threats came with so much theater. Raised voices, exaggerated warnings, dramatic ultimatums. They wanted the performance to replace substance. But loudness is a cheap trick. It fools crowds for a moment, yet it does nothing to reinforce the actual structure of their position. Beneath all the shouting, their threats were fragile, propped up by fear rather than strength. Your calm didn't just counter their noise, it destabilized it. Calm is underestimated because it doesn't dazzle, but calm is weighty. Quiet, methodical pressure doesn't draw attention at first, but it creates shifts beneath the surface. Just like a seismic tremor, it doesn't announce itself with bluster. It builds quietly until the structure standing above it cannot endure the stress. Their brittle threats, which depended on you flinching or panicking, suddenly found themselves collapsing because you didn't respond the way they expected. Calm robbed their noise of oxygen. When you stay composed under pressure, it does more than protect you. It reveals them. The louder they shout while you remain steady, the clearer it becomes that their threats are hollow. Crowds begin to notice the imbalance. People compare your stillness with their chaos, and the contrast does more damage than any counterattack could. In time, their threats no longer sound intimidating. They sound desperate, like glass cracking before it breaks. The real shift comes from consistency. Your calm wasn't passive, it was structured. You didn't react to every outburst, didn't rush to defend every accusation, didn't crumble under their staging. You applied quiet but unshakable weight, facts, patience, presence, resilience. That steady pressure accumulates like tectonic stress, at first invisible but eventually impossible to ignore. And when the breaking point comes, it isn't dramatic, it's inevitable. Their threats, so loud at the start, disintegrate into rubble under the pressure they never thought to prepare for. In the end, loudness is a sparkler, bright, noisy, fleeting. Calm is an earthquake, silent, enduring, transformative. They mistook volume for stability. You showed them that true power doesn't shout. It shifts the ground beneath their feet until nothing they built can stand. Number 12. They cultivated humiliation as theater. You forced them into backstage reality. Their entire strategy depended on performance. They staged moments of mockery, exaggerated failures, and choreographed scenes meant to make you look small while they basked in laughter and applause. Humiliation was their script, and the audience was their lifeline. As long as the crowd kept clapping, they felt powerful. But theater has one weakness. It isn't real. It survives only as long as the curtains stay closed and the backstage remains hidden. The moment the audience sees behind the curtain, the illusion shatters. Backstage is where the truth always lives. It's where the masks are tossed aside, where the alliances aren't nearly as strong, and where every whispered disagreement contradicts the unity shown on stage. They thought they could keep that part hidden forever, but reality doesn't respect curtains. By refusing to play the role they wrote for you, you exposed the backstage. You made people look beyond the spotlight, and when they did, they saw the chaos, the jealousy, the double-dealing, the desperation it took to maintain the performance. The same crowd that once laughed at their script now looked at them differently, because once backstage behavior is revealed, it's impossible to unsee. That exposure was more devastating than any clapback. You didn't need to outshine their performance, you only had to let the truth illuminate what was happening behind the stage. Theater thrives on illusion, but illusions are fragile. When spectators realize they've been manipulated, they don't just stop clapping, they turn on the actors. Betrayal of trust burns deeper than any scripted humiliation, and suddenly their audience wasn't entertained anymore, they were disillusioned. What they never understood is that humiliation as a tactic has no longevity. It works for a moment, but it requires constant feeding and ever bigger performances to keep the crowd engaged. Meanwhile, backstage reality is patient. It waits, gathers evidence, and grows undeniable. By dragging that reality into the open, you dismantled the only thing that kept their show alive, the illusion of control. And once the performance dies, so does their power. Without an audience to manipulate, their theater collapses into dust. They're left not as grand performers, but as exposed frauds, standing in the harsh light of reality with nothing left to hide behind. Humiliation may entertain, but reality decides what survives, and in that arena they never stood a chance. Number 13, they mistook spectacle for strength. You turned spectacle into evidence. Spectacle is seductive because it dazzles. Loud entrances, dramatic gestures, exaggerated threats, all of it looks like strength when judged in the moment. Crowds love a show, and those who mistake entertainment for authority are easily fooled by it. That's why they lean so heavily on spectacle. They thought volume could replace results, that if they shouted loud enough and staged enough stunts, no one would stop to measure what was actually being accomplished. For a while, it worked. People clapped, people repeated the lines, and the illusion looked solid. But illusions don't age well. You didn't need to fight their spectacle with equal showmanship. You only had to record it. That's the flaw in performance-based power. Every act leaves a trail. A dramatic accusation, a bold promise, a staged victory. Each of these looks impressive in the moment, but once captured, time-stamped, and compared to outcomes, it becomes a receipt. Spectacle thrives on short memories, but evidence thrives on archives. You created the archive they never expected to be held accountable to. The more they performed, the more evidence they gave you. Their own theatrics became the record of their incompetence. Every contradiction, every exaggerated claim, every promise that failed to materialize was sealed in time. The show that once convinced people of their strength transformed into a catalogue of their weakness. They thought the crowd was their shield, but the crowd became their witness. Applause is fleeting. Recordings and memory are permanent. This is why evidence outlives applause. Spectacle depends on constant renewal. New drama, new tricks, new noise to keep attention alive. But evidence doesn't require constant feeding. Once the proof is collected, it speaks forever. The same theatrics that once entertained the audience now serve as testimony against the performers. Their flair is no longer seen as confidence, but as cover for lack of substance. What looked like dominance in real time now looks like desperation in replay. In mistaking spectacle for strength, they doomed themselves to exposure. Strength builds, spectacle distracts, strength endures, spectacle evaporates. And once the smoke cleared, what remained wasn't the memory of applause, but the undeniable record of failure. You didn't just strip away their illusion. You let them build their own case against themselves, one performance at a time. Number 14, their empire was built on borrowed attention. You called the lenders. Attention is the currency of influence, and for a time they seemed rich. But the attention wasn't theirs, it was borrowed, rented from trends, scandals, borrowed loyalty, and the constant hunger of people looking for the next spectacle. That's the illusion of power. It looks permanent when the crowd is big, but the crowd doesn't belong to them. It belongs to the suppliers, platforms, networks, insiders, even the same people they manipulated into listening. And borrowed audiences always come with terms. They mistook attention for ownership. They assumed the noise would never stop, that as long as they created enough drama, the flow would stay steady. But attention has rules. It shifts, it demands freshness, and above all, it can be redirected. The moment the suppliers of that attention realize they're being used to prop up empty authority, they withdraw. When those lenders are informed, whether by evidence, exposure, or the undeniable collapse of credibility, they stop paying the rent. And once the rent isn't paid, the empire has no foundation left to stand on. That's why your role wasn't to outscream them, but to shine light on the ledger. By exposing the truth, you made the lenders aware that their investment was toxic. Nobody wants their platform, their network, or their reputation tied to something already rotting. The withdrawal begins quietly at first. Less promotion, fewer mentions, distance in language. Then it accelerates. Full disassociation, contracts ended, invitations revoked. It's eviction, and it happens with ruthless efficiency once the lenders realize the liability is bigger than the return. The collapse of borrowed attention is brutal because it's fast. One day the empire looks unshakable, the next it's deserted. Their audience wasn't loyal, it was rented. And when the suppliers cut the lease, the same crowd that once clapped and cheered moves on without hesitation. They aren't left with supporters, only with silence. That's the consequence of building power on what isn't yours. Borrowed attention is volatile, unstable, and unforgiving. When you called the lenders by revealing the truth, you didn't just weaken their influence. You triggered the eviction notice. Now their empire isn't crumbling piece by piece. It's being cleared out in one decisive sweep, leaving them with nothing but echoes of applause that no longer belong to them. Every trap they set became the blueprint of their undoing. They gambled on lies, spectacle, humiliation, and fear. But each move left behind evidence, fingerprints, and fractures too heavy to carry forward. What they mistook for dominance was nothing more than rented power and borrowed attention, both of which always come with an expiration date. By refusing to play their game, you shifted the terms. You didn't fight fire with fire. You let their flames burn through their own stage until nothing remained but smoke and ash. This isn't just their downfall, it's the revelation that truth, patience, and structural consequences always outlast theatrics. When the applause dies and the crowd moves on, what's left is reality. And reality has no mercy for those who build empires on illusion. Their spectacle became evidence. Their shortcuts became their undoing. Their empire of noise collapsed under the weight of silence they could not control. Piece by piece, one by one, they are being dismantled, not by attack, but by the consequences of everything they once thought made them untouchable. And now the curtain has fallen. The performance is over. What remains is accountability. And it doesn't applaud. If this message hit you deep, don't just keep it to yourself. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next revelation. Hit that like button if you felt the power in these words. Drop a comment to share your thoughts or experiences. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear the truth today. Every click, every share, every word you leave in the comments helps spread the light further and dismantle the illusions faster. This channel is more than content. It's a movement, and your support keeps it alive. Stay blessed, always.